So over here in Ois Hay, he's continuing to explain the pasuk. We started explaining the Madrega of Yaakov and Madrega of Yisrael. You say it says lo hibit oven biYaakov, v'lo ra omal biYisrael. So explain first Yaakov. Yaakov is the avodas eved. Yaakov is the struggle. Yaakov is to overcome iskafia, to overcome, and with the help of the Eibishter. And now we're going to learn about Yisrael. Yisrael is this hapcha. He's going to say this is the difference between the davening of the weekday and the davening of Shabbos. The weekday davening is in a way of a struggle, which with the level of Yaakov. But the davening of Shabbos is a level of Tainuk, is a higher level. That's the level of Yisrael. Now let's look inside. Pirish. This is an additional advantage in the level of Yisrael, which is not in the level of Yaakov. Over there it says by Yaakov, it says he doesn't look at the oven, which is the seat. It doesn't allow to interfere. So there is the help of the Eibishter lohibit oven, but still there's a lot of work there. Aval yigia yimotzeba, but there is a effort. You find it doesn't. The Eibishter helps you, but you still got to work hard for it. Yaakov hu b'chinas avdi. Yaakov is a level of my servant. And the service that's an effort, that's strenuous work, to subdue the other side and to turn darkness through the tefillah and the mitzvahs above. When is Yaakov v'hainu b'chol sheishes yemei ha'maisa? That's during the 6 days of action. Pasuk says, Sheishis Yomim Tavid. You should work 6 days. Basically, and the same thing in Tefillah, and the same thing in Avodas Hashem. 6 weeks, 6 days a week, we have to work. Just as, for example, the physical work, to plow, to sow, to cook. So kach u'ba'avodas Hashem b'tefillah b'chol sheishes yemei ha'maaseh, the service of Hashem in davening, the 6 days of action. Tzorich liyos b'chin as avodah zu b'yigiyas hanefesh v'yigiyas basar. You have to work this service with effort of the soul, effort of the flesh. Lihisboinen b'gedulas ha'avaya u'lahoylid ava v'yirah Hashem, to reflect on the greatness of Hashem, to give birth, to create a love and a fear of Hashem. U'lahoytzi milibay haritzonu zoreh is the nefesh habamis, and to remove from his heart the strange desires of the animal soul. Ad sheyileh rak rotzen echad until he only has one want to his Father in heaven. So all this is through a great war with the Yetzer. The Zohar says, Shas loiso shas krova. The time of davening is the time of war, because at that time you have to fight for the hisbonenus and to remove all strange desires of the nefesh habahamis, so that you can only have a rotzeh to Hashem. Similar, it says in Parshas Eikev over there, it says, Somuch lepaltin sholchol lekavashto v'atahoylech u'mekabesh chulu. You haven't yet conquered next to your palace, so you're going to conquer other places, basically, before a person can bring down godliness into the world, he has to have his own struggle to win over his own yetzer. If the person didn't affect to turn around his bad character traits, and to draw down the revelation of godliness through davening, how is he able to bring down godliness into the world? Okay, so that's why one needs to conquer his body and his animal soul through davening. As I say, a person should always see as his holiness inside you. As Kirbech HaKodesh, the Pasuk says. So, you first have to make yourself holy. Your own Nefesh HaBaham is through the davening, and then you can go out and bring down godliness into the world. For that requires effort and strength, the strain of the soul kidei. So that it should be godliness, the revelation of God in the soul. And then he will bring down revelation of godliness in the world. For that reason, you can't eat before the davening, because before you're davening, you haven't conquered it. At that point, before davening, the soul is still in your nose, meaning you're still a Metzias. How could you sort out the food and to elevate him if you're not elevated yourself? Ad achar hatfilo. Forget it. The neshama ba'abe means the soul hasn't yet, because you haven't worked through yet your midday, so the soul is just in your in the beginning. It just came down. The Eibusha gave you life. You still have the neshama, but you haven't. The neshama has not yet expanded into your body, because it can only expand once you remove and you allow for the neshama's expansion through the avoid and yigia. Ad acharat tefillah. So then the soul spreads out in the entire body. After the soul spreads out into the entire body, to elevate the food, and then he can sort out the good from the bad. The eating that is also referred to as war. The Zohar says, that, so in other words, the birurim that you do later on through the eating is a war by the sword, the mouth of the sword, meaning by the blade of the sword, you eat bread. What does it mean? So what are we fighting over there for? Over there we're fighting that the eating should be l'shem shemayim. It shouldn't be just for time behind you. The lochim in my yetzer, that is to wage war with the yetzer. That the eating should not be just with desire, rak l'shem shemayim, only l'shem shemayim. And that way he is mevarer the good. So because this is the avodah during the 6 days of action, the 6 days of the week. This is the level of Yaakov Avdi, my servant, a level of avodah. This service, this is with effort, with strain. That's the level of subduing. This is what's called an Oved Elikim. There is an Eved who is already a servant, which means he has completed his avodah. He went through the struggles, and now he became a servant. But there is an Oved, means he's presently, constantly waging war. He's always working because there's a battle going on, and that's the avodah. Avo b'Shabbos, but when it comes Shabbos, hu b'chinas b'shanoisei es taimei. Shanoisei es taimei, you change your usual way, your reasoning. Vayigorsheyu vayelach. The pasuk says over there by David HaMelech, story in the Tehillim, that Abimelech chased him away. Meaning, this represents chasing away the Ra, not having to fight with it anymore, but then you are back, totally rid of it. The darkness has turned to light. Ad shuhu b'chinas menucha, he becomes in a way of relaxation. Ve'ein nimtza by amol klal, there is no effort. The Shabbos, there is no effort. K'moshe kiboy shavas. It says on Shabbos you rested. This is the level of Yisrael, which is Shir Kel. It's a song, Shor Kel, Shir Kel, a song for Hashem. Shua Shira Shal B'chinas Kel. This is the song of the level of Kel. Diksiv Chesed Kel Kol Hayom. The kindness of Kel is all day. What does that mean? We're going to explain that it's the removal, the shira, and the kindness of the fact that there's no more blockages. That now his davening is in a level of tainug already. He went through all the struggles, and now it's his hapcha. So he can see the revelation. B'hainu, shetfila the Shabbos hu atainug. The davening of Shabbos is the delight of the greatness of Hashem that the Yidden are delighting over when they're davening. His bonus v'asoga b'gedulas Hashem, through reflecting the greatness of Hashem. So there's a level of joy, a level of time. Taste and you will see Hashem is good. A level of toiv. Be rejoicing. The Parshas should probably say Bepirush, right? He says Bepirush. You have the Yud after the Pei over there. No, but it should be a Yud over there, it seems like. In Parshas Chukas, maybe it's the Parshas. As Yoshu Yisrael. So he says Yisrael the Leil. Huh?
Maybe it's a song as Yoshu Yisrael.
Yeah.
The
Parshas, it could be also, it seems more like the Pirush because he gives an explanation. Yisrael the Leila. So that's what it seems at the first glance. Okay, but Yisrael the Leila, the Gilui Zeh b'Shabbos, and that revelation of Yisrael the Leila, which means the level of Yisrael of above, gets revealed on Shabbos. That's why it's Yoshir Yisrael the Le'elo comes down. The Gilu Zeh Shabbos. Talo the notif ma'atiko, the dew that drips from Atik. Al posik shira shira. Yeah. Okay, so now and that's why we're saying he doesn't see any effort. There's no effort there. Why? Because the work is not with effort at all. Rak lis anegal Hashem. It's only to delight over Hashem. V'koroso l'Shabbos oineg, to call it all a level of delight. V'hatam lozeh she'ein tzorich b'Shabbos lebchinas omel v'yigiyah nasha b'chol. What's the reason, Take, we don't need on Shabbos the effort and the strain that we need to put in the weekday? So we're saying that on Shabbos, the davening is just delighting over Hashem. The weekday, you're battling. But on Shabbos, it's kavei Shabbos. It's just enjoying. Why is that? It's kihine Shabbos is oisius toshev. So same level toshev. Which means because on Shabbos the soul returns, it's up on a higher madrege. So during the weekday is a descent of the energy, which the feet, the bottom goes down into the negative, which basically means that the name Elikim blocks. No, the same that the Hashem is like the Shemesh, the Shem Havaya, and the Elikim block. So we have to deal with the blockage with the Hester. That's why you have to scream out in the davening, to get out from that blockage. That means Oved Elikim. What do you mean Oved Elikim? You say Oved Elikim. You're serving Hashem? No. Oved Elikim, you're working through the Elikim. You're working through the Hester. That Elikim should no longer block you. That means Oved Elikim, meaning Lisakin, to fix, to correct the Hester v'Ha'elim, Hanimshach M'Shem Elikim, to fix the block, the obscurity that comes from the Shem Elikim, so that it shouldn't block and obscure. There's no more Elikim. There's no more Hester. Pirush shekol sobchinas madreges midas hatzimtzum Hester the Shem Elikim. That has concluded. There's no more tzimtzum Elikim. Nimshach is galus Shem Havaya. And now there's a revelation of Shem Havaya. That's what we say Shabbos LaHavaya. Shabbos for the Shem Havaya, for Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. So Shabbos oisius toshev. This is why Shabbos is the level of return. Why is it returning? Because it's going back to the Shem Havaya. The Elikim is not blocking anymore. Aliyah So'ilamis, the elevation of the words. Nikra Shir Keil, Shir Elikim. That's why it's called the Shir Keil. The Keil is the short of Elikim, but this is the Shir of Keil. Why? Because we go out from the Hester. We're no more Elikim. And Shaykh Tzaka. That's why there's no screaming anymore. Like Adrabe, Hais Angus Ba'Hashem, Min Hagilu Shemizgala B'Shabbos. Over there's a level of delighting in Hashem, which is revealed on Shabbos. So Gamkein Mamer Shahefresh. This is also the difference between Bechinas Yaakov and Bechinas Yisrael. So Yaakov is the Ein Bezer V'Yishchaz HaKufay Dal Dom Dal. Ukmashikosu. Like we say, Lo Yikore Shimcha Od Yaakov Kim Yisrael. You're no longer Yaakov. Now you're Yisrael. Why? Kisorisim Elikim. Because you have overpowered Elikim. You are no longer in the Tzimtzum. You are connected to Yisrael, to the level of Havaya. That you overpower the name of Elikim, which blocks. Master Oid should no longer conceal. Gilu Shem Havaya, and it should be the revelation of the Shem Havaya. that is through that he has already been victorious. He beat the obscurity of the Nefesh HaMamish. Hashem is with him, Ima Mamish. It says, "V'loiro amal b'Yisrael." The pasuk says, "Hashem elikov imay," because there's no amal because Hashem Mamish is with him. Shabbos Shabbos Mizgale benafshi b'chinas elikuz b'chinas ginul Mamish. On Shabbos is revealed by the person's soul the level of Mamish elikuz. Mash'enkin b'choil ein Mizgale elikuz benafshi b'chinas gilui. Over there, godliness is not revealed during the weekdays. Over there, you're still yelling from the depth, the point of your heart to Hashem. There you wish, you want. You're asking for the level of revelation. Shabbos is actual revelation. Hashem Elokov is with him. Over there, it talks about Inyan Beis Hamadreges B'chinas Ponim u'B'chinas Ocher Sheyesh B'Kedusha. So that in Kedusha there is a face and the back. When you're at the level of the face, you don't have to face Amalek. You don't have to face the battle. When you're at the level of the back, over there, you have to deal with Amalek. So that means there is the distraction, the Shem Elikim. So that's what it says there. That over there, there's B'chinas Ochshav Kedusha. So Inyan Beis HaB'chinas, these are the same levels of Yisrael and Yaakov. Ub'chinas Ocher the Kedusha, when we're dealing with the behind of the Kedusha, or midlanegda b'chinas Amalek. Over there, there's Amalek stands behind, stands against you. You got to fight Amalek. But over there, he is in the level of Ponim. It says, explains in the Mamer over there you don't have to deal with Amalek. Why? Because there's no Amalek over there, which is the level of Yisrael. You've already conquered it. Amalek, see, the word Amalek actually has the word Amal. Reshiso b'chinas Amal. The beginning of the word Amalek is Amal. Amal means effort. That's why by the Eden says V'leira Amal b'Yisrael. Where does it say by Yisrael? Because over there, there's no Amal, there's no Amalek, there's no negativity. As opposed level of Yaakov. Kivan sheYaakov adayin b'chinas avoda v'higia the kedusha, since it's still working and the effort of kedusha. Al kein oimed lenegdoi ha'amal d'l'umazeh shem b'chinas Amalek. That's why it stands for him that effort of the amal l'umazeh from Amalek. But still, even though he has to deal with Amalek, but Amalek can't win him. Amalek won't be able to beat him. Why? Because Hashem is wages war and Hashem helps him. But you can't come to the level of Yisrael, which is the level of Shabbos, if you don't first have the level of Yaakov. You first need the workday week, and then you can go to Shabbos. You can't start just with Shabbos. You have to start with the weekday. Al derech, similar to what we say, a person who makes effort before Shabbos to prepare the Shabbos meal, everything he needs for Shabbos, then when it comes Shabbos, he can eat. So he says, very interesting. We see that Hakoyde LeYaakov Lachein, therefore, Hakoyed Yisrael Yaakov Eino Iver Ba'asei. K'may Hakoyed Avram Avram. So if the Torah says by Avram your name should be Avraham and not Avram, the Gemara says if somebody should call Avraham Avram, he'll be violating an asset, a prohibition. The Torah says you shouldn't call him anymore. Why are you calling him? But by Yaakov, we say no. Even if a person, Hashem says your name is no longer Yaakov but Yisrael, somebody should call Yaakov by the name Yaakov. The Gemara says he's not violating a prohibition. Why? Because we find that the pasuk itself later on refers to Yaakov as Yaakov, even after the pasuk says your name shall no longer be Yaakov but Yisrael. But it does, Torah itself calls him Yaakov. So you see that there's no prohibition against calling him Yaakov. But what does this mean conceptually over here in the Avodah? Basically, it means we still need the Avodah of Yaakov. Even though is Yisrael, can't start with Yisrael. You always go. That's what he's saying here. You're not going to be violating the Esa, Kim Shimcha, should I say the law, but it's an essay. Kim Shimcha. Mishum Deloinek Hashem, Yaakov the Gamri Yisrael. The name Yaakov has not been totally uprooted from Yisrael. The Adri Kro, Yaakov. Because the pasuk comes back and refers to him as Yaakov. But in ideas, this is from the above mentioned reason. Cannot reach the level of Yisrael only through first doing level of Yaakov. Why? First, you're not to occupy yourself to sorting out the weekday birurim, the sakin, to fix a hester, the blockage. That's how Yaakov. Then you can eat on Shabbos, which means to elevate them higher and higher, Hashem, and to the light of Hashem, which calls the Motzei Shabbos, Altira Abdi Yaakov. Don't be afraid, Abdi Yaakov. What's his name? Because we're coming back to Yaakov. Now, after Shabbos, we're no longer Yisrael, we're back to the level of Yaakov. So we say, don't be afraid, Yaakov. Keep Shabbos on Yisrael. On Shabbos, we're in the level of Yisrael. You don't need the effort and the work to sort out. Shabbos you can't sort out. Kiboyer osur b'osur. Boyer is osur. Rak onu oz b'bchinas ben bonim lamoke. We are on the level of Ben. We are children. The level of Ben bonim lamoke. Ayin zoyer chelik gimel daf tzadik zalat. V'achar kach motzoi Shabbos. And then later on Motzei Shabbos. Shemistalek is an neshamas yisera. The extra neshama leaves. V'tzorich lachzer v'leited liyas b'bchinas Yaakov avdi. And we got to go back and to become again my servant Yaakov. B'chol sheishes me'amaisa during the 6 days of the of work. Levarer b'brurim b'v'yacholu, to make the view b'brurim b'v'yach. Kach oimer, that's what he says. Al tira avdi Yaakov. Don't be afraid. Milated shom. From descending there. And that when you say don't be afraid, that's the koyach. The Eibishter gives you, when Hashem says don't be afraid, it gives you the koyach to overcome all the challenges of the 6 days of the work of the level of Yaakov. And that's the way you give him, and this is with this, by saying Al Tirah of the Yaakov, you give him the strength and the power. That's a Yerida for the elevation that will take place in the following Shabbos. You have the similar of Shabbos when you're saying the Shema, that's the Shabbos, or the Amidah is Shabbos. And the previous, the Psukkah de Zimra, that's the Yaakov. Yaakov and the Israel. Utruas melech boy. Rom of Bi'Yakov, Hivdov and Bi'Yakov, Rom B'Yisrael. Kashem Elokov Imoy, then it says, Thruas Melech Boy. What does it mean? The Thruas Melech. In the Bepirish Thruas Yeshne Pirushim. There's two interpretations. Aleph, Loshin Shvira. The breaking, Upirur, and taking apart. As we say, Kemoi, like we find in the Pasuk in Tilim, it says, Teroyem B'Shevet Barzel. Take him apart with a metal stick. That's one pirush. The other one means a friendship of the king. The pirush Rashi b'Chumash Kan, as Rashi explains here in the Chumash, that we are friends of the king. They're both true. In the Avodas Hashem, there's both true. There's the level of shvira that you have to break the negativity, and there's the level also divides into these two levels. You have to understand the Pam Motzinu, sometimes you say, Melech b'mishpat yamid oretz. Seems like very strict. King uses judgment. There's a law we know, V'dina de malchus dina. The law of the kingdom is the law. So that means that it is a gevuras. Shuhu mebchinas gevuras. That is the level of gevuras. But the light of the king, there's life. So we say, Anpoi the Malka Nihirin. The face of the king is shining. Bechinas chasodim. That there's kindness there. So sometimes it's gevura, and sometimes there is chesed. What is the king? There's two levels of melech. So it says there, Kadmalko Yosif al Kursayo Ikri Melech Ilo. When the king sits on his chair, on his couch, then he's called the supreme king. When he goes down to his servants, then Melech Zuta Ikra, then he's called a small king. So depending on the level of Malchus, two stages of Malchus. When he dressed up in Biyah, so then Melech Zuta Ikri, he's called a small king. Birida Zu, and that descent, that comes through the level of Gevura and restrictions. They speak your Malchus and they talk about your strength because that's the strength. That's the level of Gevura of Malchus. As written elsewhere. So then is b'mishpat yamid. Over there is judgment. Dina de Malchus. So that's the level of judgment. That's the level when Malchus comes down. Into the world. Dina de Malchus. Sheikh b'Shabbos. Shabbos u'b'chinas kad Yosef al kursaya. Then he's sitting on his chair. And Shabbos, there is an elevation of the world. And the level of Hashem's measure of kingdom, it goes up, it unites in its root. It goes up from Biyah into Atzilus. There is the face of the king, the shining face with the supreme shine. Through the revelation of the supreme delight, that's from the level of the Ratzon of all Ritzonos, which on Shabbos is revealed in the level of Malchus, and then we have the level of Chesed, that's the level of Kursaya when Malchus goes up. So, Truas Melech Boy, and this is the Truas Melech means friendship. That means friendship and Chibud Shabbos. That goes on the level of Yisrael, which is the level of Shabbos. So, then he's with Hashem Mamish. Hashem is Anag al Hashem. He's actually And he gets the level of Truas Melech, the friendship. Truas Melech boy, meaning Hainu Gilu B'chinas Reis V'chiba, B'chinas Raiv V'chol Ravim. That level of friendship and dearness from the level of Raiv V'chol Ravim. Shenimshach B'midas Malchus Knesset Yisrael, which extends to the level of Malchus, which is Knesset Yisrael. B'ayim Mashkos B'negam Kim Divra Maschel B'oy B'dei Chodesh. B'dei Chodesh, B'ayim B'zoyer Chelek Aleph, Davkuf on Aleph, B'dav Reish Vav Med Beis. And through this level of the elevation, not only is it tainig itself, but all the difficult, all the dinim also become sweetened. Those gevuras, those restrictions and hardships and the gevura, which comes down during the 6 days, they become sweetened through the Aliyah and Shabbos. Machmas is galus raiv the chol raivim, because of the revelation of the raiv chol raivim. It says in the Zohar that what? The chol dinim is abrimina. So all the dinim are way visible. So when you remove all the dinim, that means the first pshat, Loshen Shvido Pirur, that's breaking and separating. The Hainu, Shemisparin Hagavuris, the strength get broken up. That is sweetening them. When you break them up, that's sweetening them. With your strength, you took apart the yom. The intention behind the trua of the Sheven Hashanah, to take apart the scarab, the supreme gevuras of Yitzchak, which is called Bezoyer Emer, as written in Bezoyer Emer. Trua Pirur Zeh. How does this happen? What days? Galus Bechinas Raiva the Kol Raivim. Raiva Kol Raivim. Shin Reiv Vechibas. Nimtza turns out Beisa Pirushim Eilim Bekona Echad. Both of these interpretations work out perfectly together.